We're here in Kendal, a little town tucked away in the hills near Port Macquarie, and I want to show you something that I found very interesting. This cross, like many other places in Australia, there's crosses, but why? They say that our worldviews are formed by stories, first of all, the stories we keep telling each other, and then those stories are related to the big questions we're trying to answer about life and why we're here and where it's all going. And then once we've started processing that, we begin to create symbols and put those symbols up and sort of embed our story with the symbol, and then that sort of determines our lifestyle. So that's how worldview forms. And this cross behind me here, if you come over this way, something very interesting about this cross. The designer has started on this side of the cross, telling the story of creation with Indigenous people. Looks like the patriarch, probably Abraham, Moses, and then King David up there. And then around on this side of the cross, he picks up the story of Jesus in the New Testament. So that's the Old Testament, New Testament, birth, baptism, changing water into wine, healing a lame man up there. And then around this side, Jesus entering Jerusalem on the horse, on the donkey, the Last Supper, the crucifixion, the resurrection. So it's sort of telling the whole story of the Bible on the faces of the cross. Now, a Roman who arrived here from 2,000 years ago would be absolutely astonished to discover that crosses, which they designed as an instrument of torture and tyranny, had become a symbol of hope that people would embed their story on. If you come around this side, there's a very interesting thing that the creator of this cross, the designer, has done. He's actually told the story of this little town called Kendal. So down here starts with the Indigenous people living here, and then white settlement, and then this face here is Henry Kendal, the poet who lived here, and then looking at the modern world. So what he's done, can you see it? He's actually said our little story in Kendal is related to this big story that starts way back with Abraham 4,000 years ago, connects to the story of Jesus and connects to us. Well, in the modern world, I think that's very interesting, that he would embed their little local story in God's big story that's set out in the Bible, and it's placed on a cross, which the Romans meant to destroy and dehumanize. But somehow or another, the Christian story and the Jewish story before that, connected, become a symbol of hope. So when people look at this, and they attended this church, probably thousands of prayers and hymns have been sung in this church and then across the road in the Anglican church. I mean, I've met people from this town, for example, Nancy Bird Walton, the first woman flyer to get her name the airport in Sydney after her. She said her dad used to play the organ, probably in that church across the road, the Methodist church. And I visited with her just before she died, and she said, you know, there's one thing I really regret, that I didn't follow through more with the faith that my mum and dad had shown me. And I guess that's true of a lot of Australians. But I wanted you to see this cross to remind yourself, you know, it's embedded in our culture here in Australia, whether we like it or not. This great story from the Bible, and what this man has done here is embedded their local story. What about your story? Do you see your story as being connected to the big story? I think it's a great little parable tucked away here in Kendal, the back of Port Macquarie up in the mountains. The story of somebody connecting their little story to God's big overarching story. Maybe your story too.